Welcome to the BumbleKast. I'm your host, Ian Flynn, the Bumble King, and joining me as always is my Bumble co-host, Kyle, JCRB Krause.
It's a Friday. Wow. We're doing something that's not a mini or something else on a Friday. Incredible.
That's because we have so many questions from our patrons over at patreon.com/BumbleKast, Ko-fi.com/BumbleKast, and our YouTube members.
I'm sorry to the folks who ask questions and can't afford to pay or anything for them. We've gotten so many that it's become very difficult for us to make sure we can get to everybody, but we're doing our best. So hang in there. We'll get there. In the meantime, though, let's go ahead and get into these questions. Starting off with this one from Pit Viper. In a recent issue of Action Comics, Superman said that Manchester Black is one of the few people he truly despises and that he has given up hope for Lex Luthor. Do you think the protagonist of the ongoing series you've worked on, Sonic, both IDW and Archie, and Mega Man, despises or has given up hope for their villains, Eggman, Starline, Wily, and Xander Payne?
Archie Sonic, I think you could make the case pre-reboot that there is a degree of hatred. Hate isn't really something Sonic dwells on, but he would kind of relish winning in a less positive context than current Sonic does. Current Sonic does continue to hold out hope that, you know, any of the villains will get over themselves and do the right thing, and until they do, he'll continue to thump them whenever they do something stupid. Mega Man, I think he reaches a kind of breaking point in 7, but, and this is speculatively speaking, had the book gone on to that point and beyond, I would like to think that he just doesn't like that feeling. He doesn't like feeling that way, and so he strives to not feel hatred, because it's not a good feeling. It's not a constructive or pleasant emotion to experience for anyone, let alone a synthetic being. Aggravation, sure, but I don't think Rock would dwell on that. I don't think he would reach a level of hate and then stick to it. I think it would be flashes of anger and then move on, because in the end, he is a pure and good individual.
Is he, though? Is he really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Now, I say all that. I think, I don't know how set in stone it is, but I think modern Sonic strongly dislikes Zavok at the very least. Well, I can't say officially one way or the other, but I think he relishes stomping on his face more than anybody else when you get down to it.
Well, I mean, Eggman doesn't tend to fight Sonic direct physically, hand-to-hand, normally. Usually he's in like some kind of robot, some kind of vehicle, something.
Yeah.
Yeah. At least with Zavok, it's more of a direct sort of combat thing for him, so maybe that's part of it.
Yeah,
he can punch him. He can punch him in the face. He can actually punch him in the face.
Like, Eggman's aspirations, evil as they are still aspirations for something greater. He wants to achieve something. He wants to build something. He wants to prove something. Zavok just wants to cause misery and destroy. There is nothing noble or aspirational or even remotely defensible. He's just a jerk for the sake of being a jerk, and he relishes that. And I think that might be the bigger distinction.
Maybe.
You know, Sonic can see Eggman coming around and doing the right thing one day, maybe, possibly, please. But Zavok is just trash and likes that he's trash. So there's nothing really to redeem.
So you're saying we'll never see Mr. Zinker? Oi. I got a question from Professor Scruffy Matt. Good news, Ian! Your benevolent Sega overlords have asked you to write another Capcom crossover. The catch, Mega Man is not involved this time. Instead, it's going to be a follow-up to the most recent Sonic game. You know, the one where he's dead on a train. They're calling this crossover The Trial of the Murderer of Sonic the Hedgehog, starring Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, a.k.a. World's Objection! How does the story go, and can you come up with a better title? Also, spoiler warning for murder of Sonic the Hedgehog.
I can't help but whenever Scarfy or somebody starts off a question like that, I just hear Professor Farnsworth out of Futurama. Good news, everyone!
Yep, that's what everyone...
It's another question! So, Phoenix Wright and the murder of Sonic the Hedgehog. Frame it in the context of it's another kind of party scenario, but they weren't going to do the murder mystery thing. And there's Sonic on the floor again, so that's a little unnerving. That wasn't part of the game plan at all. And Phoenix is there for reasons. It's a Capcom crossover, whatever. Maybe it's a Capcom convention. And is there a lawyer in the house? And he has to investigate and figure out who it is who did the deed, rather than an OC. And go after Espio since he was the culprit last time. Spoilers. Go for the obvious folks. Is there Eggman involved this time? And kind of play with expectations and subvert them where you can without getting too convoluted. As for a better title, I don't know. That incredibly run-on sentence is kind of fun in its own stupid way.
I had a good one from the chat. It's Turnabout Party, but
much shorter.
Yes.
There's that for it.
Yes. Phoenix Wright, Turnabout Party. But it's also got Sonic in it. Featuring Sonic the Hedgehog, but he's dead. Hopefully for good this time. Here's one from Scourge Time. All right, it's Sonic Team Racing DLC time. We get a new story chapter about new racers. Scourge joins in with his team. What would this little story be about, and how do their vehicles look like? Scourge on his old motorbike would be cool.
Premise seems easy enough. Dodonpa, who apparently has interplanetary travel and the ability to recreate entire biomes, if not worlds, for racetracks, has a handy-dandy interdimensional device, and boop, there we go, Antiverse access, and brings in Scourge and crew as a kind of measuring stick. It's like Sonic, but different. Let's see what the levels are when we compare the two racers. I know we touched on this in the past. Who do we have for Scourge's team? Do you remember?
I feel like it was Fiona, at least.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe Sergeant Simeon. Otherwise, you did the Mirror Sonic team. I think we did both, but something like that. It might have been for Heroes, but either way, I feel like the Destructix makes more sense than the inverse Team Sonic.
Yeah, I mean, if Scourge is going to actually anticipate needing a team that will work with him rather than drive him off the road. As for the ride, the motorbike, sure, but I kind of like the idea of him just getting his own version of the Speed Star, except it's black and green with flames painted on it.
Well,
it makes it go faster.
Well, no one said that you couldn't have two vehicles. Let's bring in some DLC. Let's bring in some other DLC for the other characters and give them all different options too. Come on.
I guess it was only cars, whereas Riders had all sorts of crazy vehicles.
Yes. Come on, let's take a page out of Mario Kart's book and give everyone bikes and cars.
Well, I mean, if the whole thing is to compare and show up Sonic potentially, I could see him wanting his own version of the Speed Star. And if he's going to trust anybody with this bike, it'd be Fiona.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. And for the third, Speed, she's kind of more technical, so I guess power. I guess it would be Simeon.
Simeon, more power.
Simeon gets a Jeep with like a dedicated weapon mounted in the back. You're only allowed to use wisps. Uh-huh.
He just gets the warthogs
Seriously,
from Halo.
don't fire that on anybody. Uh-huh. Driving the Puma.
Or that, yeah. Either way.
Hey, Sergeant Simeon. What's the name of that Mexican demon? Eats all the goats. That'd be the Chupacabra, sir. I like that Sonic Chupa thingy. I like it. It's got a ring to it.
Nice. All right, here's one from Scurvy Pirate Hog. We've seen Snively work for different incarnations of the Doctor, including Sat AM, modern, and classic versions of Eggman. But just for the sheer fun of it, Snively is stranded in New York City, and now he serves the Chaos Council. How does it go, and how does he feel about each Eggman?
Oh, he is utterly miserable.
I think so.
Like, they are all the worst incarnations of Eggman in their own way. Like, each particular gripe he has about Eggman has been distilled into an individual. Whether it's the cantankerousness or the egotism or the aloofness or the infantile tantrums or just the egotism alone. In one package, you could moderate it. You could play to one side, maybe appease him in some way. But when it's fractionalized into 5, there is no balancing that. Oh, God, he joined the Resistance faster than any other incarnation.
And I don't think he would get along at all. He would not be happy. And none of them are really even his Eggman. They're all wrong. They're all wrong.
Like, he barely has any feelings for the one that's actual family. No, he ain't gonna put up with this. Get out of here.
No. Get that guy out. Shove him out the door. But he might
Snively,
be.
You're okay launching a nuke at a baby, especially the baby.
The baby. Oh God, the baby. But is he jealous of Mr. Dr. Eggman's toupee?
No, that thing looks awful.
Yeah, but it's hair.
The whole point of a toupee is to make it clear that you have hair. It's the illusion of looking like real hair. That don't look like real hair. That looks like something a cough piped up and it landed on his head.
Well, I mean, it's a 3D render. What do you want?
Standards.
It's a 3D render with a cartoon animated budget. I mean, what do you want? This isn't Final Fantasy.
Snively has standards.
This ain't Final Fantasy over here, where each strand is meticulously crafted.
He will come over the 6 hairs that he has before he gets that hairball plastered on his cranium.
All right, fine. We got a question from Sonic Man. Okay, Mr. Ian, I gotta know, who in Sonic's gang of friends/enemies pretends to be security to get backstage at a Taylor Swift concert?
If Amy had no other option, she might try it. Just out of the kind of thrill of the moment. I know some of you are thinking Shadow would, but no. He would just get an Emerald and Chaos control his way in.
Yeah, he doesn't need to go through all.
To be anybody.
Yeah, he doesn't need to go through all this. Yeah. I'm being suggested Espio. It's like, well, no, it just turns invisible and goes in. Like, don't need to put too much effort.
Maybe that's Vector's suggested plan. They'll all dress up like security and they'll act like they're buddy with everyone, and they'll make their way to the back door. And Espio's just like, I can turn invisible. Yeah, but the door, I can climb up walls. But I already bought the uniforms.
But how do I get in? How does Vector get in?
Do you even like Taylor Swift?
Well, maybe I do.
Vector doesn't really like it, but Charmy does. Charmy doesn't even know what any of her songs are. It's just that's what's popular right now. So therefore, yeah, of course he loves her.
Tangle might do it.
Yeah, but that's more for the fun of playing dress up.
Well, I mean,
being goofy.
Yes.
Didn't you buy tickets already? Yeah, but this is more fun.
Yeah, but they're regular tickets. I didn't get the VIP tickets. Boom Knuckles. What about Boom Knuckles?
Yes, absolutely. It's not his idea. It's Boom Eggman's idea.
Yes.
But there's nobody else who would go in with him on this plan. So, Knuckles, do you like Taylor Swift? Do I? Did you get tickets? No. Well, I have a plan. You do? Do I? Well, then, we better act swiftly. And they become like best buds for the whole episode.
All right, well, another Sonic Boom episode plot in the bag. We got there eventually. It all comes back to Boom. Here's a question from Sonic Padge. Did you ever see that Adult Swim April Fool's series trailer for Learning with Pibby from a year ago? If not, basically, its premise was that the titular character of a cheerful children's edutainment show has a world attacked by an amorphous black glitchy ooze that consumes all in its path and corrupts characters it comes in touch with, turning them into deforming, goopy, digital, zombie-like versions of themselves. Thus, Pibby must travel the multiverse of Cartoon Network and XBs of other network shows to gain allies to fight this mysterious dark threat. What I want to know is, how would Sonic and friends and enemies deal with this dimensional phasing threat, assuming they have their knowledge from the Metal Virus incident? Conversely, what if this amorphous meta-evil attacked during the classic period?
Well, if it showed up in a post-Metal Virus world, there would be a degree of preparedness for it. Everyone not immediately rushing into it or immediately falling back and taking preventive measures. Sonic looks Shadow dead in the eye. Don't fight it. I won't. Don't get transformed again. Don't nag me. And there would still be loss, to be sure, because it's another zombie plague, but I think they would be more coordinated and focused and smarter about it. Coin flip on whether Eggman says, nope, not dealing with this again, and helps out, or decides maybe he can take control of it, and inevitably it doesn't work. In the classic era, I'm not quite sure, because by the time I did not see Pibby or any of this, so I'm assuming the joke is, light, fluffy edutainment pablum being forced to endure horrific consequences.
That's what it sounds like.
And classic is generally meant to be more lighthearted, so I could see the parallels there. I'm just not sure off the top of my head how best to play that for the joke. I mean, you don't necessarily have to come up with it right here and now because, I'm not pitching an ongoing, but I think that would be the general approach if it were in the classic timeline. No, wait, people are going to misconstrue that. The classic era, there we go, is to treat it more as a lampoon rather than a necessarily serious storyline, which modern would do.
Yeah, maybe. All right. We got one last question before we take a break. It's from Steph Cube. I would like the Sonic team to show us another hedgehog girl besides Amy, to know a little more about the hedgehog species and what characteristics are typical of males and females, such as the spikes on the back that Sonic, Shadow, and Silver have, but Amy doesn't have them. We don't know if it's a male thing. The only female hedgehogs that I can remember are Sonic's mothers in the Archie comics and the Underground series, and Sonic's sister in that same series, but all of that was Western. What do you think of this? Do you think it would be good for Sonic Team to let us see their vision of how hedgehog girls are by letting us see them more in games and comics?
Now, technically, classic Amy does have the back spine.
Yes.
So one could construe her modern design as just personal grooming.
Maybe.
Hold for laughter, return to commentary. Or they weren't really thinking that because the modern era was supposed to be kind of like the new direction for the series, and this whole past present thing is a fairly new thing to be cemented. So there's only so much rationale one can make retroactively. Well, I certainly am not opposed to seeing more world building. I don't think it's necessarily something that needs to be addressed with any kind of expediency. We have a fair number of hedgehog characters, and the individual species aren't really treated like races in other media. Like, it's not like your orcs and humans and elves and taurens and whatnot in Warcraft. It's, this is a character, they happen to be an animal. that informs some of their design elements, but not too much. It's not really a big deal. So I am all for seeing more of it, but I am not, losing sleep over having that answer anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. There are also, weren't there a few more, like Sonic's mom in the manga, which is obviously not official, but...
Yeah, that's not really something you can cite. And there were the hedgehog avatars, but the avatars were so universal, I wouldn't really call upon that either.
The avatars were just kind of the same body with a beach ball head swapped.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there was Breezy, but again, she was Western, and her comic redesign was mostly Archie. I don't know if SEGA really had much of any say on that one, if they...
Not that I'm aware of.
If they did, because I know that Archie didn't work quite as closely with SEGA as far as character stuff goes at that time.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe someday. In the meantime, though, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more BumbleKast. We're back, and we got a question from Stephen A. Question to Kyle and Ian, if he's familiar. Death Clock / Metalocalypse are getting a movie. Are you fans of Metalocalypse? Yes, I know you missed a boat on Adult Swim, Kyle, but there's always a chance you picked it up. No, I have not, actually. So I am passingly familiar with Death Clock and Metalocalypse. Which is a shame, because it's probably something that would be right up my alley, but, there's so many things, Ian. Why is there so many things?
And they keep making more.
I know. They need to stop. I need to get caught up. I'm like 50 years behind at least.
And I know of it by name only. So I have no horse in this race, sorry to say.
Well, that's a shame. Maybe someday we'll be able to circle back to your question, Stephen. Maybe someday. Here's one from Supernova. When Shard is being built by Uncle Chuck, he brings up the Metal Sonic Troopers that Chuck also made. Was he aware of the fact his data was being used? Was he aware when he was plugged into Chuck's computer? Can you attach Shard's gem to an excavator and let him go nuts?
I don't know, but he would certainly want to try. Let me slip into something a little more comfortable. I don't think he was aware at the time, but it's something that he learned of very quickly after the fact. God, I'd have to go back and reread the context of everything, but I don't think the personality core was really meant to be conscious when not active. So he would have been dormant until he was brought back online. As for what he could interface with, as much fun as it would be to put him on an excavator, I think he needs a compatible system. Like, an excavator is not something that runs autonomously. You need someone to actively pilot it. So he would just kind of be affixed to the dashboard and be shiny. Now, if you modified it, maybe. But I think he needs to have an actual piece of hardware meant to incorporate him to work.
Tails could rig up something in that excavator and let Shard have some fun.
Tails, buddy. Let's forget about that time I tried to kill you. Can you do me a solid?
Yeah.
See, there's this excavator over there, and it's real cool. Could you, maybe, possibly, if you find the time, in the next, 15 minutes, plug me in and let me just go a little nuts, please. I'll be your friend.
I love it. There's one from the Phantomist. So I had a dream a while ago where new SEGA mandates were revealed, and Sally, Bunny, I assume the rest of the SAT-AM cast were okay, Pachacomic, SPO, and Vector just couldn't be used anymore. Okay, weird. How would you establish this new status quo for the characters? Bonus points if Vector goes out like a champ, like in Metal Virus.
Odd.
But
Sally and Bunny, they're off the tail right now, so that's not any different.
Patch a Comic has not been used in forever, except that one Sonic Channel thing recently.
Yeah,
or no,
I mean,
he was just in a poll. He wasn't even in the thing, was he? He didn't win that poll, did he?
I don't think so.
I don't
think so.
No, I think it was Chaos that won that poll. Which,
I mean,
good.
He's dead, and he's not really relevant to a lot of stuff. So
yes,
we could even make references to the echidnas of the past without specifying him. That's not a problem. If Vector and Espio were gone, I would just say they're off doing their own thing, investigating. Charmy wasn't mentioned, but he's kind of part of the deal. Send him along with them. And, they're off doing investigative things, and you just don't run across them until, whatever decision this was gets reversed and they get brought back. Like, nothing dramatic needs to happen. You just don't bring them up. Kind of like how some of the classic characters who haven't been modernized don't get brought up. Just you don't talk about them and you do other stuff.
Yeah.
It would be awkward not having them around because they're fun. I like them, but it's just you tell stories that don't have them and you don't call attention to it.
Well, we don't need Patch Comic. What do we need him for? Forget that guy. Maybe Sonato.
He's not even in the Patch Comic.
Ah!
Patch Comic.
Kill me. Here's one from Tic Tac. With the recent revelation by SEGA that IDW is in fact canon, well, this has actually been established quite a while ago, so I don't think it's quite recent. But anyway, I've been seeing a lot of discourse, both on the meaning of the term as well as the implications it has for IDW going forward. Now, I'm sure it's obvious when someone official says that IDW is canon, they mean that the events of the comics happen to Game Sonic. For instance, we can assume that Frontier Sonic had already gone through the Metal Virus Saga, met Tangle, dealt with Surge, etc. Now, my question is, what is being done to make sure IDW doesn't feel like filler now that it is part of the game canon? The only thing the games have actually done to show that something from the comic actually happened is mention Tangle once, and such evidence is not enough, as one can argue Boom is canon because of Styx, but that's not true. I fear as a comic book reader that nothing of importance is going to happen in the comic because you all have to wait for the games to come out for meaningful status quo shifts. And even then, wait upwards to a year or more for those shifts to reflect in the comic. Feels disingenuous to say that it's canon when nothing in the games reflect it. I'm reminded much of being a fan of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. back when the show was produced, where creatives kept insisting that it was canon of the MCU, only for the movies to totally ignore them. I really don't want to be strung along by a one-way relationship that the comics may react to the games, but the games never acknowledge them in a meaningful way.
I think it's a different mentality you have to take with what the franchise is.
Yes.
When you say any kind of meaningful story movement, there hasn't been a lot in the games themselves.
I was going to say, there hasn't been since 2003? Maybe?
Like we'll start at the beginning of the modern era with Sonic Adventure.
Yeah.
And the main narrative, Sonic's struggle against Eggman, does not change.
Nope.
In the course of that story. Knuckles' personal story gains a little more context. We know what created the island, but his personal story has not changed. We don't know where he specifically is from. His devotion to the Emerald hasn't changed, or protecting the island. He remains fairly static. Gamma, who didn't exist before, doesn't exist after, and there are references to him later, but nothing of great real narrative importance. And what little arcs Tails and Amy have are forgotten by heroes, the third title to come along.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are certainly moments of progression, Blaze being a signature example.
And Shadow.
But you have, Shadow, obviously, he's a whole other kettle of fish.
Well, yeah,
but stuff like Sonic 06, which was a major tentpole title, ultimately had no bearing on the narrative, because Silver's first real appearance in the narrative is Sonic Rivals 1. That's the point where he meets the cast for the first time, in quotation marks, and that interaction is what carries forward. Everything in 06 undoes itself, ultimately. So to say that the comics are filler when the games themselves do not push any narrative envelopes 9 times out of 10, I think is a bit of a disingenuous comparison. The reason why you read these comics is you enjoy these characters, you enjoy their world, and you enjoy the adventures that they go on. They don't have to have a greater purpose than that. They don't have to progress in any meaningful way because they aren't ever going to. Sonic's never going to change. Eggman's never going to lose. Tails will never surpass Sonic. Knuckles, he may never get off that stupid flying rock. The status quo, the characters and the world they're in is largely stagnant. The interest is in how they engage in it.
Yeah.
So the games do take narrative precedence because they are the greatest exposure, to be sure. They would set the most major markers potentially. I don't know, it's kind of hard to say because Frontiers is the first time in a long time we've had anything really attempting to turn that gear. And until the next game comes out, we don't know if that actually is going to cause any greater effect. But it's to say that it's filler because it doesn't change anything in the greater narrative is it never has. Like even the Archie books in their own little microcosm didn't really go very far. You had status quo changes, sure, but who the characters were and their relationships with each other remained fairly static from the very beginning all the way to the reboot. Sure, Bunny and Antoine came together. Antoine came out of his joke character stage and became something a little more standalone. But these were incremental changes, and the greater narrative, the continuing battle between Sonic and Robotnik for control of Mobius, that stayed the same. Iron Dominion was a big shakeup, but in the end, it didn't change much of anything. Mm-hmm. It was just an adventure, and it was, if you enjoyed it, hopefully, an engaging one, it was fun, but it didn't really change the whole narrative structure. So, things that might be created in the comic, like Tangle, can now be considered accessible to the game world, and if she shows up there, hot diggity. Or if there is new material introduced in the game, hopefully we will see it appear more readily in the comic. We'll see. But if you're coming into the comic or the game or Sonic in general, looking for a narrative that is going to take you somewhere in a meaningful direction and come to a conclusion, it's been 30 years. It's not going to happen. That's not what Sonic is. If you're here because these characters are cool and they do cool things and you really want to see the adventures they go on and have those minute changes from time to time, then you're set. But it all comes down to what your expectations are for the series.
Right. Yeah, I can't think of really anything super meaningful that's happened between Colors and Frontiers other than Colors introducing the Wisps. That was like the last big thing, I think, that was established something new in the world before Frontiers. So I guess the Zeddy, but people hate the Zeddy, so it's kind of unfortunately kind of something that they're probably not really going to revisit much, if at all, in the games going forward because of that, but who knows?
Well, let's take those examples. They are new elements.
Yeah.
But how do they move the narrative forward?
They don't.
And the answer is they don't.
No.
Lost Hex is a mysterious world full of potential to be explored, sure. But that doesn't reveal anything new about Sonic or his world or how it works. It's just a weird set piece at the moment.
Right.
And what potential it could have does not mean anything. It's just potential.
Yeah.
And the Deadly Six are new adversaries that can bring a different flavor of action, to be sure. But they have not challenged or changed Sonic or Eggman in their dynamic in any way. They're just a new piece on the field. They're a new toy to play with. They are a new conceit to instigate action.
Right.
The Wisps being on the planet are a new gameplay element. When you get down to it, they're not a new narrative element.
Yeah.
The revelation that there are intelligent aliens in the world has not changed the narrative in the slightest.
Right.
And they're just kind of around. And they're neat. I like the Wisps. They're fun. And they are a neat gameplay gimmick, but that's what they are. They're a power-up.
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah. And also you got to remember, Tick Tick, there's only been one game since this canon IDW canon announcement happened. I've only had Frontiers. It's like you got a sample size of 1. I think you got to wait a bit before you say that. You say for sure that it's like, oh, these aren't connected. These aren't actually connected. It's like, okay, it's fair to be concerned about that, but you got 1 game. I mean, if you want to count Murder of Sonic in there too, okay, fine, you have 2. But I think Murder of Sonic is Murder of Sonic in any way considered canon.
It's not even technically supposed to be a game.
I know it is, but you know what? It is. So in our hearts, it's canon. Just like the Twitter takeovers. They're not actually canon, but in our hearts, they feel canon, dang it. And then Sonic Origins was just a re-release of the original of the Genesis games. Like, what do you want?
Yeah.
It's like, that doesn't really count. I feel like Murder of Sonic could easily be canon. There's really no reason why it couldn't be.
Well, all right, if we consider it is, and it is a fantastic game in its own right. I know it's not supposed to be, but it is. It is. Come on. Visual novel, whatever.
Is it not? Wait, it's not supposed to be a fantastic game? Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying it's not a game?
Let's not. You know what I mean. It is fantastic.
It is a game. Listen, visual novels are games. Let's not.
All right.
It doesn't get around here. It's an interactive story. What do you think a video game is?
Regardless of how we want to quantify it.
Yes.
It itself does not move the narrative forward.
Not really. Although
it is a self-contained adventure, and it is incredibly engaging. And if you would, I think if you were to ask most folks, does it have any merit because it doesn't move anything forward, they would say, who cares? It's an incredibly entertaining experience with the characters. And that's what it really comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it does flesh out a lot of the characters, though, because this is, for some of them, this is like the most we've ever seen them interact with anybody. Like,
true enough.
SBO
them forward.
SBO's like, oh, we're finally learning something about you. Okay, it's like,
And I also don't like the comparison of Agents and Shields and MCU because they are all building towards something. Their phases, their progression of characters, their ever-expanding world building. There is a greater plan to move forward with those. Sonic doesn't do that.
Yeah. And I know Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was an unfortunate casualty of the split between Marvel Entertainment and Marvel Studios or whatever. So the TV side got real screwed over, which is a shame. But that's corporate infighting, sometimes that's how it goes, unfortunately. All right, let's move on to the next question from Twilord. If Sonic's parents were, by his standards, slow motion world travelers, as you said, could you write Sonic so he didn't miss meals or curfews?
Well, in this scenario where Sonic's parents are more pedestrian world travelers, they would be the type of people to raise someone like Sonic.
Yes.
And if there's someone to raise someone like Sonic, they wouldn't have curfews. Come now.
Curfews. Silly. Curfews.
It'd be like if Sonic happened to come across them in his own travels. He'd be like, hey, you got anything to eat? Yeah, sure, sit down. All right, thanks, bye. Gone off. He looks healthy.
Yep.
Very casual.
Yep. All right, we got a question here from Twilord's 3-year-old niece. All right, well, hey, different person from Twilord. Don't get mad.
The BumbleKast, corrupting children as young as 3.
Well, let's do that now then, I guess. How does Sonic get the rings? For context, she saw a Sonic diorama toy and was wondering about the physical reality of ring collection. I froze up, unable to explain the intersection of surrealism and abstract game mechanics that I take for granted. Oh no.
Well, When he grabs a ring, it turns into sparkles and it hides in his glove.
Yep. We'll go with that. Here's a question from Ty H. You don't get the impression that the people who ask you to put things in the comic or convince SEGA of others don't really understand that a professional job is about doing what your boss asks you to do, or he or she fires you?
There is a degree of misconception, sure.
Mm-hmm.
I personally am in a unique position where I can provide certain feedback on, I have been asked by so many people to have such and such appear. Is this something that could fit in future timetables, or is this something worth putting together as part of a greater pitch for future endeavors? Or if there's, questioning of what to do next, or what do we think people want to see? I can take my personal feedback that I've received and say, hey, they would want to see this maybe, or such character has gotten a lot of hype in my feed. Does that match what social and marketing have seen? Could we do something with that? This is why I say if you want to see the Freedom Fighters back, you continue to push on the social media platforms and provide solid metrics. Because if I come in and say, hey, we should bring the Freedom Fighters back, and everybody kind of goes, I'm like, hey, social team, what have you received on your end in terms of feedback and support? And they can say, actually, we have X number of users or tweets or engagements that have focused on this. We've received this much fan art, quantifiable stuff to push. But I am not someone who can make executive decisions. I'm at best, I can say, hey, I think this would be neat, and this is why, and try to sell the idea and have them go, yes, that would be neat. Do that.
Oh, if only you could sell them a Sonic Warriors game.
Oh my God, dude.
I still want to see that very much. Very much. Yes, we need a good old Sonic Muso.
Cash and the studio and the extra manpower to do approvals and all this.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Let's just say the pipeline can get clogged real fast.
Yeah. You got to get multiple developers involved and stuff too. Multiple publishers, companies. It's like, but come on. We need Sonic Dynasty Warriors, Sonic Muso. We need that. Need it in my life. All right, here's one from ZOV to close us out. You made an interesting point in that you would have separated the universe of X-Dive from the Mega Man X lore, but nonetheless keep sort of X-verse analogs for some of that mobile game's original characters. So that got me wondering, what kind of stories/roles could you imagine using your chosen analogs for? And how exactly would they differ from how they were portrayed in X-Dive?
I have imagined it's something akin to what Tales of the Rays does with all the Tales of characters, and just explore stories and interactions that you can't normally have in what is the set canon. Have a Sigma that isn't corrupted, maybe. Sigma before the infection, the hero that he was meant to be, working alongside Rico and X and shoot Rock and EXE. Have interactions between Rock and X without worrying about how it's going to pollute the timeline. Who cares? We have no timeline. This is the world of Dive. Everything is canon. Everything can go. Have some of the Maverick bosses before they go like full cuckoo bananas Maverick. Storm Eagle before he's pressured into betraying everyone. Go nuts with it. Take characters from any point in time, any area of their characterization, and utilize it in new and interesting ways. And through that, I feel like you could use it as a teaching tool, as a marketing tool to, tell the layman, well, this is what was standard, and here's the different way. I think we kind of got a little taste of that with Colonel Iris. I'm not calling her Iris Another. That's the stupidest possible name. Colonel Iris is a great what if scenario playing with the material. So stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I want to see, like alternate universe versions. Let's do something different, you know? I mean, we haven't seen Mega Man X in decades at this point. So, I mean, other than X Dive, I guess, but you know what I mean. Let's go crazy. Just have some fun with it. Who cares?
That, and since, it is Dive and it's a repository of the historical data that's being corrupted, you can go in both directions. I was initially talking wholesome stuff, heroic Sigma, but you could do something like, what if the Maverick virus went wild in the classic age?
Oh.
Maverick roll? Anybody? Gonna clean your clock?
Oh no. She'll clean a bit more than that.
Maverick X? Zero, who was never rescued? Wild Berserker Zero? All sorts of, possibilities. It is a never-ending well of fun what-if fanfic material. You could go forever with that.
Yes. Well, on that depressing note that we're never going to see that, I guess it's time to end.
Thank you to all our patrons over at patreon.com/BumbleKast, Ko-fi.com/BumbleKast, and our YouTube members who supported this episode, who support this show, and just keep us running. You are all greatly appreciated.
But that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for listening.
Yep. So be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and we will see you next time on the BumbleKast.
Bye. And that's the BumbleKast forever. This was the last one for this week.
And the mic stand drops out of my face.
You didn't eat that, did you?
You've been listening to the BumbleKast, a co-production of Bumble King Comics and the KNGI Network. Original theme music composed by Ken Coda Snyder. Remixed intro by T-Lopes. Find out more information, along with podcast feeder links, MP3 downloads, and more at bumbleking.com and kngi.org.
That's what you think.
Bold of you to assume I think.
Oy.